Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are going to crack open the Statistician's Toolkit. We're talking about 3 really powerful tools that'll let you find the real story that's hiding inside any set of data.
I mean, let's be real. When you're staring at a giant wall of numbers, like in a spreadsheet, it's just overwhelming, right? It's pretty much impossible to see the big picture. And that's exactly why we need tools to help us simplify things, to find the center of the story.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by talking about how to make sense of all that data chaos. Then we're going to meet our 3 key players, the mean, the mode, and the median. And finally, we'll wrap up by figuring out which tool you should use for any given job. So first things first, how in the world do we take a huge list of data points and boil it down into something we can actually, understand?
Just imagine you're a teacher and you've just graded 30 tests. This is what you've got. It's just a jumble of numbers. You can see a 10 over here, a 95 there, a couple of 40s, but what does it really tell you about how the class did as a whole? It's tough to say from this alone.
So the very first move is to bring some order to this chaos. And we do that by grouping the scores into ranges, or what statisticians like to call class intervals. So instead of looking at every single score, we start asking questions like, how many students scored between, say, 10 and 25?
And boom! Look at the result. All of a sudden, a pattern starts to pop out. You can see right away that the biggest group of students, 7 of them in fact, scored somewhere between 40 and 55. We just went from a messy list to a clean, super readable summary.
All right, now that our data is all nicely organized, let's find its center. And we're going to start with the one you probably remember from school, the mean.
You can think of the mean as the data's center of gravity. It's pretty straightforward. You just add up every single value and then divide by how many values there are. The key thing to remember is that every single score, from the very highest to the very lowest, gets an equal say.
So, how do we find the mean for data that's already in groups? Well, since we don't have the exact scores anymore, we have to do a little bit of estimation. Using something called the direct method, we just take the midpoint of each range, like 47.5 for that 40 to 55 group, and we basically pretend all 7 students in that group got that exact score. After that, it's just a matter of multiplying, adding, and dividing. And when we run all the numbers for our student scores, what do we get? We get a mean, or your classic average score, of 62. So you could say that, on average, the students scored a 62 on this test. Now, this is where things get kind of cool. Statisticians are always looking for easier ways to do things. I mean, what if our numbers were massive? Multiplying huge numbers would be a total pain. So naturally, they came up with some clever shortcuts. They came up with these clever ways to handle really big numbers. One method involves just guessing a mean to make the math easier, and another one simplifies it even more. But here's the really cool part. No matter which method you use, the long way or one of the shortcuts, they all lead you to the exact same answer. For our students, that answer is always 62. Okay, time for tool number 2 in our kit, the mode. This one answers a completely different but just as important question about our data. So, forget about the average for a minute. What if what we really want to know is just, what's the most common thing? What was the most frequent score range for these students? This isn't about balance. This is all about popularity.
Yeah, the mode is all about frequency. It's the value that shows up more often than any other. It's basically a popularity contest for numbers. For our group data, we first have to find the modal class, which is just the group that has the most students in it.
And if we look back at our student data, it's super easy to spot. See that 40 to 55 class interval? It has 7 students, and that's more than any other group. So that's our Modal class. The most common scores are hiding somewhere in that range.
Now we can use a special formula to pinpoint the most likely score inside that popular range. For our students, that score turns out to be 52. So this tells us that the most common single score was probably a 52.
All right, on to our third and final tool, the median. And let me tell you, this one is a secret weapon for dealing with a really common problem you'll find in data.
See, here's the mean's biggest weakness. Imagine if one student absolutely crushed the test and got 100, while almost everyone else was kind of hovering in the 50s. That one really high score could pull the whole class average way up. We call those extreme values outliers, and they can seriously distort the mean.
And the median is the hero that isn't bothered by those outliers. It's like the democracy of data.
You just line up all your values from smallest to biggest, and the one smack dab in the middle is your winner. The outliers don't get to shout louder than anyone else.
Now, finding the median in our grouped data takes a few steps. First, we create a running total of students to figure out which group holds that middle person. Once we've found our median class, there's a handy formula that helps us zero in on the exact score that splits the class perfectly in two.
So, for our class of 30 students, the middle is right between the 15th and 16th student. When we do the math, we find the median score is 66.4. And what that means is super simple. Exactly half the students scored below 66.4, and the other half scored above it.
And there we have it. We've defined our three key measures: the mean, the median, and the mode. Now for the final, and honestly the most important step, knowing which one of these tools to pull out of the toolkit and when.
This right here is your new toolkit, all laid out. You'd use the mean when every single value matters and there aren't any crazy outliers. You'd use the median when you're looking at something like income, so a few billionaires don't make it seem like everyone's rich. And you'd use the mode to figure out the most popular t-shirt size to order for your store. It all just depends on the question you're really trying to answer.
So here's the big takeaway. The next time you hear someone say the word average, I want you to pause and ask yourself, which average are they talking about? If you're talking about house prices, would a few massive mansions in a neighborhood affect the average price? You bet they would. So which average is going to give you the real story? That's the power you have now, the power to look past the numbers and find what's really going on.